Hello, my name is Rocky Cordray. Coming to you from Pamela's Place, the clinic run by Sacred Circle. And this presentation is called Housing Survival. It's based on a class that I have taught for several years, working uh, mostly at the road home. I'm now with Sacred Circle and case manager here for a PSH that was just constructed. And housing survival is all about helping clients to game plan and think about how they can extend their long-term rental history so that it serves them for the rest of their lives and helps them not only heal, but also thrive in housing. So the class that I teach usually focuses on the tools and methods that they use to survive on the street, and use those as discussion points to discuss the new set of tools that they need to survive in housing. So we talk about, the things that they have to do to survive. It begins with the number one law of the street, which is basically to resolve conflicts with threats or physical violence, and how they have to transition over from that into resolving conflicts with calm discussion and nonviolent solutions. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that today. The immediate use of resources is kind of how they operate on the street. There's a culture of transactions that they experience while they are experiencing homelessness, and they have to transition away from that into storage of resources and saving money, not spending it right away, so that they can survive the types of challenges that they will experience in housing. The first thing I kind of want to discuss, rather than doing my normal class, I've kind of honed in on 3 or 4 key topics to discuss. The first one is something that I've been exposed to since I began working here at Sacred Circle Healthcare, and that is the concept of the medicine wheel. If you ever see the logo of Sacred Circle, you will see that they kind of wear this idea on their sleeve. Their logo is made of a medicine wheel. The basic concept, you can find medicine wheels in every different type of Native American tribe. The different, iterations of it vary by tribe, but the basic concept is the same. And I'll kind of hold up a piece of paper here that shows that there's 4 quadrants that you kind of use to identify different versions of the self. And these quadrants they focus on, the body, the mind, the emotion, your emotional self, and your spiritual self. Spiritual is not meant in any sort of religious way, although that application is available if you desire it. But the spiritual self could also be the symbolic self, for those who are not inclined to believe in spirituality. But either way, the goal is to identify all 4 of these quadrants in your life, and to allow them to kind of bring you back into balance with yourself and with your surroundings, which for a lot of our clients would mean being in balance with subsidized housing, those sorts of things. It's apparent on the most basic level that the experience of homelessness tends to keep people focused a little too keenly on the physical and the emotional quadrants, And so the way to bring them back into balance is to, try and coax them into thinking more about the mental and spiritual aspects of their life, so that they're not, overloaded on one side or the other. Reminding them to pay attention to and care for the mental self and the spiritual self helps them to be self-corrective, because understanding housing with the suggestions of the medicine wheel communicates the opportunity for healing and growth, and housing kind of puts on the table for them an opportunity to not only survive but to thrive in housing. And so after being immersed in this concept and discussing it at length with my coworkers, here at Pamela's place in the clinic, I realized that it's a very powerful tool. And it can help them think about the tools that are available to them in a different way than they usually do. The first item I want to talk about, and before I do that, I want to just share one of my high art drawings. So I'm going to hit the share screen here. And hopefully you can see this. Not going to end up in any art exhibits, but maybe is helpful for us today in discussing the topics that I want to talk about. And the first one I want to talk about, they all reverberate back on the medicine wheel. The first one I want to talk about is located right here. It's called the deadbolt. And I know that may not be clear, but I tried to do a deadbolt with a doorknob underneath it. And the deadbolt is kind of a tool that's not typically available when you're experiencing homelessness. But on the street, survival is more about fight or flight. Living in a residence allows a third way to resolve or avoid conflicts, and that's to close the door and lock it. Those on the street are used to either avoiding, running, yelling, issuing threats, or getting into a physical confrontation. But these tactics always undermine their ability to stay in housing, because the neighbors all have cell phones. And as you see my little blonde landlord here, she has a cell phone also in one hand, and she has a little piece of paper. I'm going to write a 3 on there because that's usually the 3-day notice that they will receive if there's complaints about violence, if there's complaints about noise. And so because the landlord has these 2 things, a neighbor can use their cell phone to call the phone of the landlady. And that's when that has happened, you're already on the path to eviction. You've already kind of lost the chess match. And so to game plan against that, it's kind of important to talk to our clients about the deadbolts. It's a tool at their disposal. And if you consider for a second, if you're a case manager or if you're any other type of social worker and you're engaging with your clients, on the street, sometimes threats and noise can be effective tools for them to survive or for them to avoid, being physically harmed or threatened. And so there's a kind of a counterintuitive aspect, this change that they're involved in, that they have to transition into, of getting to the point where they are, committed to calm discussion, committed to nonviolent solutions of conflicts. But the deadbolt, they don't even have to talk. The deadbolt kind of looks like a tongue, doesn't it? And so in that way, it can replace their tongue, and they can learn to speak through it. Closing and locking the door kind of it provides this alternate means of just kind of avoiding conflicts. They can leave the confrontation. Um, and if it's more understood in this way, then it actually has a lot of power. Because if you learn to speak through it appropriately, you can preserve the space that is required for balancing your life, for healing, and for, having a refuge from your former trauma. And there's always trauma from experiencing homelessness. Closing and locking the door provides a barrier that protects all four aspects represented on the medicine wheel. So then one's home becomes a space not only for physical and emotional self, but also for the spiritual self and the mental self to present themselves and thrive. Having poor personal boundaries kind of invites the street into the home. And I've over the 7 years that I've been a case manager, I've seen a lot of this. I've seen clients invite the street and its ideas and ethics and rationale into their apartment. So their apartment becomes a place where anything goes, becomes a place where they are kind of locked into a sort of physical and emotional contests over the use of resources. So learning how to have healthy boundaries and use the deadbolt in an appropriate way kind of protects them, establishes something that doesn't really exist on the street, which I would like to identify as sacred space, which conversely means that on the street you have profane space. And I don't mean these terms in any sort of religious way. Again, it's more just kind of on the level of sacred space is safe space for you to be yourself. And the street doesn't really allow you to be your whole self. The street kind of restricts you to crisis. Okay. And so our clients will often mistakenly think of their neighbors and landlords as their enemies. But the actual enemy that they have when they first move into an apartment is always to be found in the bathroom mirror. Okay, so it's their worst enemy is themselves, and so having poor personal boundaries invites the street and its laws into the apartment. It invites noise, it invites fighting and yelling, and the best way to kind of address that is to kind of talk to clients about using the door as a sort of sacred boundary, and when you talk to clients, when I've asked clients in my class if there's something about them that remains sacred and valuable, they will almost always say yes. When I ask them if it's better to be alone or to be betrayed, almost all of them will say that it's better to be alone because they've all been betrayed. Part of the transactional sort of situations that are on the street is being betrayed constantly, not only by other people experiencing homelessness, but also by the institutions that they encounter, and sometimes it's not always cut and dry what happens, but if you take a look over here at this group of people that I've drawn this black cloud. And this black cloud is kind of indicative of the lens that the street provides them. Profane space provides a profane sort of lens. And that causes them to not really see clearly what's going on when they interact with homeless services sometimes. It's definitely true that, all of us that do work in homeless services can be sometimes guilty of, reacting to poor boundaries and reacting to the types of tactics they use on the street to survive with a level of disgust. But that becomes kind of a transition for us too. We need to transition away from the idea of being disgusted with our clients and into the notion of recognizing those things as trauma responses. And if that's trauma information, the only way to be trauma informed is to not allow yourself to get repulsed and to be professional and think of that trauma information as info that helps you be trauma informed. And all of these items regarding the deadbolt may seem obvious to us in the housed community, but if you look at our recidivism rates, and if you look at those who consistently relapse back into the experience of homelessness, relapse with substances, it's not too obvious, and I kind of blame that on the black cloud. It clouds their judgment, it clouds their ability to be in balance, and but it also helps them survive a little bit. So it's important to kind of take that information in a different way than sometimes we feel inclined to. But a lot of what they face once they get into housing is related to guilt and loneliness. So yes, housing can be painfully lonely, but the exchange there that we can identify for them and help them to recognize is that in exchange for that loneliness, being alone has the potential to be very safe. So maintain healthy boundaries with others and lock your door to protect your sacred space. Obtaining housing can make our clients feel guilty about their friends who do not yet have housing. But despite that guilt, and we should always acknowledge that that guilty feeling is a legitimate feeling, housing also has the potential to become a place of healing. So lock your door, give yourself the time and space to heal from your trauma. And when you do encounter your friends that are still experiencing homelessness, you encourage them to go through the same processes that you went through so that they can also get their own apartment. Because then the relationship between people changes once neither of them are experiencing homelessness, and they can even share resources as long as they have sort of the ability to retreat back into their own private space. So it's an important thing to talk to clients about, is encouraging their friends to go through the same process that they did. Another point is that giving food and shelter to others does have the potential to be a very humanizing act, an act of compassion, but being in subsidized housing is not the same thing as owning a home. Subsidized housing is more like being on life support at a hospital. If you were on a feeding tube and trying to stay alive, what do you think about another patient coming into the room, splicing your food tube or splicing your oxygen and taking half of what you need for life support? And I've talked to clients about that concept, and they don't like that idea. And so I kind of compare subsidized housing to that. So take a break from the idea of guests, take a break from the idea of helping others, and lock your door with the deadbolt to protect your life support that you have been placed on for the purpose of healing yourself and moving forward with your life. And maybe a year down the road, you can maybe start to think about helping others. But it's a very human thing to want to immediately help others, and that again reverberates back upon the culture on the street, which is totally transactional. People share food immediately because they want to take advantage of when others get food, and then they share it easily. That's kind of the culture that exists on the street. But that kind of activity will undermine you in housing. So if you frame the discussion of healthy boundaries this way, it makes them look at the tool of a deadbolt in a different way. If clients freely allow guests into their home, it becomes difficult to get them to leave. And that's when the deadbolt can actually be turned against them and become a weapon or a tool that dehumanizes them again, re-traumatizes them. There are certainly scenarios where people have to flee their apartment. But then again, that basically leaves them exposed to the aggression of any other predator that they find on the street, and then they also lose their resources. So it takes if we're going to take this discussion back to the idea of the medicine wheel, being able to have sort of balance with your body and balance with your mind and emotions and your spiritual self, you have to have access to food. You have to have space to be yourself. And so it's important to rethink housing as something that can be a home. Some of our clients that I've observed in the past do not think about an apartment as a home. They think of it as just another transitional sort of place to sleep, which can work to a point. But if you don't think of it as a home, then it becomes another item that can be used in a transaction. And so to get them away from that idea, we kind of have to sneak in the idea or concept of thinking of the apartment as a place that can be an authentic home, that is not only safe, but a place where they can thrive. Is there any questions about the deadbolt before I move on to the next thing? If so, I'm sure someone will raise their hand. And if not, we will move on to the next item. And I've drawn a picture of it here in the bottom left corner. It's the living room. Doesn't look like the most comfortable couch I've ever seen, but that's the couch down there on the bottom right. Put an X by it. This is the living room. There's a window, there's a TV, a little table under the TV, and a chair. The living room is not traditionally known as a tool that is available on the street, but since it is the first place that people enter when they go into your apartment, it becomes one of the most important tools for surviving in housing. The living room can become a game changer if it's implemented correctly. And a lot of our clients don't even think of it that way. And for the first several years that I was a case manager, I didn't think of the living room as an important tool. But through different experiences, I learned that was not true. I learned that it is very important. Game planning a living room requires kind of selling the client on the power of being able to invite one's landlord into the apartment to sit on a clean chair or couch, which is on a clean floor in view of other clean pieces of furniture, in a room that is 100% dedicated to being clean and presentable. This second line of defense is intended to disarm and sway those who have the power to evict the client. So I'll put a little line here. This person has the power. She has the 3-day notice, and she has the power to evict. And so to avoid any of the types of situations that you would encounter that would cause you to get evicted, you keep a clean living room. And the intent is to always be prepared to invite the landlord in for a calm conversation. Using the living room in this way communicates the following ideas to the landlord. Number one, that the resident has respect for themselves. Number two, that the resident has respect for the property. Number three, that the resident is not a criminal with something to hide. Number four, that the resident is not a hoarder. Number 6, or number 5, that the resident is not enabling rodents or pests. And number 6, that the resident is worth retaining indefinitely. So if a client can successfully field a visit from a landlord like this in their living room any business day of the week, then they will effectively utilize the available tool at their disposal to send a powerful, lasting message to property management that helps them maintain their housing. So simply keeping a clean and presentable living room gives them a distinct advantage over residents who do hoard in their living room, and over residents who will have a conversation with the landlord at the door, barely cracking the door, which in subsidized housing is pretty common, right? So if we can give this advantage to our clients, then that becomes a very powerful set of messages that they can send. If a client has anxiety about meeting with a property manager alone, then he or she can ignore the knock and call the property manager's office and schedule a meeting wherein they can have their case manager present or someone else who makes them feel safe. And then in the interim, they can spot check the living room so that it becomes a presentable and powerful tool when the landlord arrives. Consequently, when a case manager or housing specialist communicates this idea to a client prior to them moving into an apartment, another concept kind of sneaks in to their understanding that can be very powerful in their lives, and this is the concept of sacred space. The term sacred here, again, is not religious. It's all that association is available, but the thing that is universal and essential is that the apartment should be viewed and understood as a refuge from the past trauma, a refuge from what happened on the street, a refuge from the markets of the street. You know, I never guilt somebody for participating in something like sex work. Instead, it's important to identify subsidized housing as a refuge from the market. I was asked this question about sex work the last time I did one of these presentations, and I wish that I had thought of this back then, but the thing that I've come to in the interim is that once you've moved into subsidized housing, you've upgraded. You no longer have to do, you don't have to use your apartment as sex work. You can move up to clients that can afford to pay for a hotel, or they can go to their apartment. But your apartment is a refuge from the market. And so it's a safe space. And by not bringing clients into the apartment, it can always be a refuge, always be safe. So even if it is impossible for us to be in harmony with everything that's going on in the world, we can be in harmony with everything that's going on in our home. And so that becomes, if you can sneak that idea into their minds, it can become a very valuable tool, a very valuable way of thinking that helps them exit the thinking and rationale that they're used to from their experience of homelessness. But doing this requires strength. And so that becomes an important topic. You want to talk to clients about being strong, because it takes strength to establish your space as an authentic home. It takes strength to store and protect your resources. It takes strength to protect your heart. And your home is an extension of your rib cage. Protects your heart. If your heart is worth protecting, and they will always insist that it is, then it is worth it to establish a home that is sacred and safe for your heart to live in. The side effect of game planning a living room for encounters with property management is that their hearts are given a safe place to be in. And then if the living room is sacred and safe, then of course the bedroom follows, and the bathroom and the kitchen also. all of these rooms become space wherein the client can be themselves and not worry about being on guard all the time as anyone would be if they were in crisis. That's all for the living room. The next thing I want to talk about is the kitchen. Now, the kitchen can be a very powerful tool for housing survival, but it takes time and work to make it work in your favor. Clients who opt to eat out are underutilizing the kitchen, and they're not maximizing the resources at their disposal. One of the advantages of working here at Sacred Circle is that we have a certified dietitian, Matt Lewis, who is registered and who we can take our clients to, and we can also take him a list of food items that are commonly available at food banks or Welfare Square. And he can help clients game plan these same items that we are all familiar with, so that they have a nutritious cooking agenda, helps them maximize those items at their disposal, and save money, which they need later, which you always need later if you're in housing, because there's always some bill, there's always some item that you need. Our clients need money, so they need to save. So if clients do not become, even if they don't become prolific cooks, simply being able to store food in the cupboard and perishables in the refrigerator can be a real game changer in helping them transition away from the tools that they use on the street. Moving into a new apartment automatically qualifies our clients to a food order from Welfare Square, and Welfare Square has partnered with many homeless service providers to provide those and schedule those and allocate resources for those. So it's important to take advantage, because those are the best food orders in the city. So if they're going to have a home that allows them to be in balance with these different selves, then they have to have a stocked kitchen. The natural processes of resting and recovering from the traumas of homelessness reduce the need to hustle to survive, and it reduces the reliance on adrenaline. And that void is often filled by the physical and mental concerns that they've left secondary on the street. Those things become primary. And so, the other thing that they face once they get into housing is the potential of being exiled from the community that they know there. And so the loneliness that can come from this can be crushing, because even if they exit the community that's on the street, that doesn't mean that they automatically find belonging with people who are housed, people who have been housed for a long time. Authentic friendships are very difficult to come by. It's one of the needs that they have the most of, that we cannot give them as homeless service providers. But they absolutely need belonging, and they need to find authentic friendships. It's a tough thing to do. But having a clean and stocked kitchen can be a tool for them to engage and begin friendships with other people that are housed. Learning how to cook can be a very communal thing. And so in understanding these concepts, which a lot of us already do, and we kind of take for granted in the housed community, we understand how humanizing and socially productive sharing food can be. It can help them establish some of these friendships that are more authentic. On the same level of having a sound bed and a personal bathroom, a functional kitchen used to its potential can be immensely humanizing. Having not only food to eat, but food stored turns a home into something other than what our clients are used to. Conversely, an underutilized and neglected kitchen can drag them down. And so that's an important point to make. If there's always dishes in the sink, if there's always a mess and it's inviting pests, then that can threaten their housing, that can threaten their long-term rental history. And so that's the discussion that has to be had also. A lot of these discussions are difficult to have. They're difficult to broach because our clients are already in the middle of a hustle half the time when they're in housing. But these conversations need to be had. If the case manager can find a way to help the client take ownership of the kitchen in their apartment, it can become a powerful tool to not only survive, but thrive. The conclusion to these points, I always try to draw a distinction between the experience of homelessness and that of housing by indicating that it is an opportunity to exit the profane space, to exit trauma, and to enter a space that is more safe and sacred, wherein, they're going to experience other traumas. When you begin addressing your physical ailments and your and mental health, behavioral health, that's a whole different set of traumas that they need a safe place to be able to address those things. And so this notion of having sacred space, it resonates with our clients. I tell the attendees of my class that there is a part of them that cannot be erased by their trauma. So while they may be wounded, the wound is not the only thing that remains. There's something at the core of each of us that remains unseen until it is safe for it to come out. And this quality is what makes each of us profoundly valuable. I ask in every class if it's better to be alone or to be betrayed. And because they've all been betrayed, all of them always say it's better to be alone than the other. And so I tell them that this is an indication that there is still a part of their heart that is worth protecting. And if you're going to be that way about your heart, if you're going to protect your heart, then it makes total sense to be that way about your home, to have healthy boundaries, and to not just let anybody trammel on your living space. Sacred space is where honesty dominates. And honesty sets the stage for healing. Lies keep you on the lam. Lies are exhausting. And just like protecting a wound is exhausting, so there's no room for betrayal in sacred space. Having a spine is required to protect sacred space, to throw that deadbolt, to think of your living room as a tool that sends the type of messages you want to send. And in this way, the kitchen, the living room, the front door, all become living things, almost like a garden. And if you tend a garden attentively and correctly, it can serve you, it can give you abundance. And an apartment can be the same way, but we have to kind of sneak these concepts into case management. We have to sneak these ideas into their minds about their living space, so they don't regard it as just another transitional sort of living situation. They can regard it as something a little bit more permanent and something a little more safe rather than transactional. And these ideas resonate with our clients because they have a keen understanding of profane space. They know better than we do what happens out on the street. They know the trauma better than we do. In some ways, they are more trauma informed than we are. But consequently, the more our clients respect their own space, the more they respect the space of their neighbors. Because if you have sacred space, then of course the neighbor has sacred space. So you don't want to make a bunch of noise. You don't want to get into a fight either in your apartment or in your front door, because you have respect for your neighbor's right to sacred, quiet space also. I had an attendee of one of my classes stop me a few years ago on Fifth West when the road home shelter was still there. And he was cleaning the sidewalk with a power hose. He indicated to me that my class had saved him. And when I asked him what he meant, he told me that of somebody that had moved into his apartment. When things had gone sour with this guest and they refused to leave, he remembered what I told him about fighting and noise and how these things might clear somebody out in the short term, but then they would also lead to his eventual eviction. And so instead of fighting with this person, he started to ignore them. And he had strict silence for them for a week. And at the end of that week, the guest left the apartment on their own, and they never went back. And I was really happy to hear about this instance. You know, I don't share this example as like a perfect answer for all of our clients, because clearly it would have been far easier for him if to not allow the guest to move in the first place. But even if this person's personal boundaries were not as strict as I would have wanted, I was still able to sneak in this idea into his head, which is the general principle of respecting the space of his neighbors. So I think that there's a lot to learn from this particular instance. The resident protected himself by not allowing himself to yell or to get into the type of confrontation that is common on the street. And for many of our clients, this is the most important transition that they can make in their ability to keep apartments. So that's the presentation that I have. I'm open to. I'll stop sharing my rendition there, and open to questions anybody has, experiences that I have from teaching my class, that sort of thing. Yeah. Katie.
We have.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. Okay. So it says Katie Zaman has raised her hand. Go ahead and turn on your audio and you can ask a question.
Hi, thank you. Oh, I hear my. I am working for Tribal Opioid Initiative, and we are doing a podcast called Debunked, in which we kind of try to reduce the stigma around harm reduction. And our next season is going to focus on intersections between substance use disorder and homelessness. And I love the way that you are presenting these ideas in terms of sacred space and kind of helping us understand how people need to learn some of the skills that maybe, like, I was just thinking about if my landlord came in to my living room right now, they might raise an eyebrow, right? And I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit to that intersection, because we have a lot of assumptions about people who have housing insecurity and people who struggle with homelessness and, substance use. And I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
My first thought is that the opioid epidemic in suburbia is instructive for us, and it's instructive in that it shows that the only difference between people self-medicating in Draper or people self-medicating on the street is the ability to have a wardrobe and the ability to shower and maybe have some healthy snacks after your meth. So this whole idea of coming down on clients because they happen to self-medicate with items that are looked down upon needs to go away, and it needs the conversation needs to be broader about addiction and about how that tactic of coming down on people experiencing homelessness is really all about caste and trying to establish one class is better than the other. But it's, I mean, if people in suburban homes are using things or abusing things in that way, then that should inform us to be a little bit more understanding about what's going on the street, because that's what's available to them. Spice is available, meth is available, heroin is available, and even if it's being misused, or if it's they're not experts on prescribing themselves correctly. I think we'd have a lot easier time having conversations with them about meeting with clinical therapists, kind of destroying some of these mythical ideas that exist on the street concerning mental health, behavioral health, meeting with therapists. I've heard clients call them quacks and all sorts of things, and those are the sorts of things we have to go to war with, because it's not true. I mean, they can get prescribed something that would be very helpful for them, and now there's 2 clinics in the downtown area that can assist them with that. So that's my first thought on that.
Thank you.
Thanks for the great question, Katie.
Can I just say also, I loved your drawing. I really, sincerely, it helps me so much to understand these concepts when I can see them.
Yeah, thank you very much. And drawing helps me understand, definitely. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is James. I am a shelter manager in Cedar City.
Hi, James.
And great presentation. Really liked it. I was wondering if you might speak a little bit to what you think service providers working in shelters can do from that first touch or day one when we admit a client to shelter to prepare them for housing and to be successful in housing.
The first thing I would say is, and I always worked as a case manager with scattered site housing. There would probably be somebody at the road home, a shelter case manager, that would do a better job of answering this question than I would. But I think the first thing to understand about our clients is that they are survivors, and that identity of being a survivor is useful in housing. But the thing that they have to do is to transition away from the tools that they use on the street. So for instance, theft is a common means for survival on the street. The transition that they have to make in housing is to have respect for other people's property. You remember that song, Down with OPP? We have to talk them out of that idea, talk to them about how if they respect other people's property, and if their guests respect their neighbor's property, then that always protects them. That protects their ability to stay in an apartment. Theft can give them a quick sort of access to resources on the street, but it doesn't help in housing. And there's a lot of disgust in the housing community about theft. I would remind people about the narrative that they so dearly love about Jean Valjean in Les Miserables. And the mighty change that happened with Jean Valjean is that this religious man who let him stay in his home did not tell the cops that he stole from him. He told the cops that he forgot the candlesticks. And so maybe, maybe we need a little help in being a little less judgmental about theft. Maybe we need, and if we don't come down on them for the tactics that they use on the street to survive, and then we can talk to them about how they can transition into a new set of tools, and they can still keep the old set of tools in case they re-enter homelessness. Those will still be available for them, but the new context requires a new set of tools. So those conversations have to be had.
Great, thank you, appreciate it.
Thanks for the question, James.
Next, we have Lantern House with a question.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, this is Rochelle from the Lantern House in Alden. And I just thought that was a very powerful presentation, and I really love your perspective on everything. And I just wanted to know if you can go over your 7 points again with the living room tool that you were explaining.
With regards to the living room, the things that having a clean living room will communicate to a landlord is that the resident has respect for themselves, they have respect for the property, they are not a criminal with something to hide, they are not a hoarder, and even if everything is hoarded in the bedroom, I mean, that's still better than having it in the living room. And also that they're not enabling rodents or pests like bed bugs and the common types of pests that we see in subsidized housing, and that they are a resident worth retaining indefinitely. So a client can basically destroy all of the myths and assumptions that property management has before they even knock on the door by simply inviting them into a clean living room and saying, hey, have a seat. Yeah, what do you want to talk about? And then having a calm discussion. That is like a bazooka as far as destroying those myths and changing a landlord's whole perception of who this person is. Did you have any other questions about that?
Oh, no, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Next, we have Alicia.
Hi, Rocky. It's
Hey,
Alicia.
Alicia, how are you?
Good. I just wondered, when people are really lonely, have you found any success helping them find new friends or a new community? And if so, where have they found other communities?
It's really tough. And the tough part about it is the assumptions and myths that the housed community has about somebody who is exiting homelessness. But I think that if you can get somebody on board with respecting the property of others and even just the simple act of picking up trash that they see in an apartment complex, like when they're walking through the parking lot or the front door, those sorts of acts can change people's perception. Those sorts of acts, first of all, communicate to the landlord that the client cares about the brand of the apartment. And it communicates to the neighbors, hey, this may be somebody worth, being friends with, being friendly with. And oftentimes those sorts of, when that kind of perception is given, relationships that are more authentic can spring from that. Relationships that are not transactional, But our clients, They are 100% used to transactional relationships on the street. And transitioning away from that is difficult. That their loneliness causes them to betray their own personal boundaries all the time. We're going to see a lot of that this winter, not only in scattered site, but in PSH housing. I mean, it's going to be a cold winter, and there's a lot of people that would like to take advantage of somebody else's home and resources. A lot of people experiencing homelessness, more people on the street right now than perhaps there usually is because of what's going on with the economy. So,
Rocky, we have 5 minutes left.
okay. Authentic relationships is the thing that I would kind of talk to them about. And talk to them about the fact that even people in the housed community, even people in the upper class, the number of authentic relationships that they have, that I have, that you have, or likely can be counted on one hand. So it's not about having a bunch of friends. It's about finding maybe one or two friends that you can really trust, you know, and those sorts of things are rare. So great to talk to you, Alicia.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you for that.
Next, we have Michelle.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Sorry, I've been thinking about this too recently, about the depression rate rising just because of the holidays, the coldness, all that going on. Have you had any success with connecting clients to online communities?
I haven't. No, and it's really tough because it's difficult for them to have the same type of access online as most of us do. One of the most successful things I've seen, I had a client a few years ago who, because he had been picking up trash in front of this person's store, started a friendship with that person. They became kind of like a sub-level case manager / friend, and they became this client's payee. And so, I don't know, it's that was kind of a rare type of situation, but maybe somebody with a better brain than mine can come up with something that's a little bit more like this. You know how we adopt a highway? Well, what if we had people in the community who had very good boundaries, but were to adopt a person experiencing homelessness, maybe help them with phone calls, help them connect with resources, that sort of thing. That that I mean, that would have to be well managed and well, you know, so that boundaries are strict and healthy. But there has to be a way of connecting more people that want to help with people experiencing homelessness. So I definitely see the need that you're identifying. I just don't know. I mean, it's hard to know the answer to that question.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's an important question.
We don't have any more raised hands, and we have 2 minutes remaining.
Well, I've already expended my hot air, so I will thank all of you for participating. And
Sorry, Rocky, sorry, we did have one more really quickly.
It's me again, Katie. I was wondering if you could give us your email or a phone number or way. I would love to talk with you a little bit more.
Sure. My email is rockyc@schc.net, and the SCHC is for Sacred Circle Healthcare. And on the website, I'm going to be posting this this presentation and also the lists comparison that I use for my class on the summit's website. So you'll be able to download from there eventually, as soon as I figure it out. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, now we don't have any more questions.
Well, everybody keep your karma cool. And thank you for coming virtually to Housing Survival.
Thank you, Rocky. We really appreciate your participation and presentation. This webinar will end in 5 seconds.